Chris is the managing editor of the Lancaster Patriot, an online news and commentary outlet based in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. www.thelancasterpatriot.com. He is the author of 7 Stated Sins, the capital vices of civil government in American society. He and his wife Bess have 5 children.
Low beyond the river black, the carriage comes, the carriage black, by shadowed steed with shadowed tack, and shadowed driver driving. Child, pray, the Maker let you sleep, when the carriage comes down your street. That's a song from a children's story about a black carriage, a black horse, a black rider, who comes to take children, to take and make them slaves. And I want you to think about how people would feel about that carriage in that story. Should they not hate that carriage? Should they not despise it in what it does in taking these children from their families and turning them into slaves? I hate the yellow bus. I hate the yellow bus. There are few things I hate more than seeing the yellow bus on the roads of this state and this nation. There are 2 verses I want to share with you today. Psalm 139, verses 21 and 22. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with the utmost hatred. They have become my enemies. We are talking here about the gospel at war. Now, I've never been in war, per se, but I know it's not something that's pleasant. When David defeated Goliath, he killed him, and then what did he do? He chopped off his head. We're talking about warfare here. This is not a nice thing. Right? There's a reason women are not to serve in the armed forces. There's a reason the men of a nation, of a society, ought to fight the wars of that society, because war is not pretty, it's not nice. Now, we are talking here primarily about spiritual warfare. We're not talking about taking the kingdom for Christ via violence. But the imagery of warfare is important. This conference is the gospel at war. Now, would you know the gospel is at war with all these topics we've talked about? If you go into the average church today, would you know the gospel is at war with feminism? Would you know the gospel is at war with abortion? I'm not talking about, well, we have a stance on abortion. No, we are at war with it, and we hate it. And we will proclaim that from the pulpit. Well, the gospel is at war with the yellow bus, but you wouldn't know that by the church's testimony. You wouldn't know that by the church's testimony. Now, I hate the yellow bus. I hate it because of what it stands for and what it represents. The yellow bus represents 60 million dead babies. The yellow bus represents transgender surgeries on minors. The yellow bus represents homosex celebrations in the streets. The yellow bus represents those things. It represents legislators voting to take more of your money via forced taxation. It represents Reuben King facing 5 years in jail, a Lancaster County Amishman, for selling rifles and shotguns to his neighbors. Could go to jail for 5 years. The yellow bus represents Amos Miller, another Lancaster County man, who faced jail time and thousands of dollars of fines because he sold meat, organic meat, to his neighbors. The yellow bus represents those things, and my goal in this brief time is to tell you why. Does the law of God really make a difference? Does discipleship make a difference? Does it matter what we teach the nation? My contention to you this afternoon, there's two main points I'll make here. The first one is this. The ideology of the classroom, the theology of the classroom, becomes the ideology of the government within a generation or two. There was a man Viktor Frankl was his name. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he said this, he said, he saw the horrors at Treblinka and Auschwitz. He survived them. He said, this didn't originate in some government ministry in Berlin. That's not where this came from. You know where this came from? It came from the classrooms and the lecture halls. That's where this came from. And I want you to know, every injustice, or almost every injustice, I should say, that we see happening today, you know where it started? In a government school classroom. And the injustices that my children, and your children, and your grandchildren will experience, you know where they're being prepared? Right now, in a government classroom. Why? Because the law of God is not being taught. There is a law being taught. It's the law of man. Man's law is being taught. So, how did we get here? Right? A lot of people say, man, how did it get this bad? Well, I want to go to a quote from A.A. Hodge. If I can pull it up, I will. If not, I'll summarize it. A.A. Hodge, this is probably 1880s. Look, if you can pull up that quote from A.A. Hodge. He was writing, he died in 1886. And he said, if we implement a national government educational system run by the government, it's right there, Luke, right after the three faces there. No, we'll go back. There we go. All right. This is what A. Hodge said. He said, I am as sure as I am of the fact. Can I get that up there? One more, Luke. There we go. I am as sure as I am of the fact of Christ's reign that a comprehensive and centralized system of national education separated from religion, as is now commonly proposed, will prove the most appalling enginery for the propagation of anti-Christian and atheistic unbelief and of antisocial, nihilistic ethics, individual, social, and political, which this sin-rent world has ever seen. Friends, how did A.A. Hodge see that over 100 years ago? You see, the issue today, people say, well, how did it get so bad? It should be much worse than it is now. It should be much worse. If we had had over 100 years of the nation being taught the law of man and not the law of God, we should be surprised we don't see more murdered babies, more trans surgeries, more homosex celebrations in the streets. A.A. Hodge saw it. Why didn't the Church of Jesus Christ see it back then? I contend that they didn't see it because they lost sight of what Jesus said when he gave the Great Commission. Your job is to disciple the nations. Your job is to disciple the nations. What does that mean? Teach the nations how to get to heaven? Well, that's part of it. There's much more to it than that. I think when St. Patrick went to Ireland, he said, okay, I'm just here to tell you how to get to heaven. But you Druid priests, you pagan priests, you can keep teaching the people everything else. I'm just going to tell you how to get to heaven. I don't care how you live your life. Of course not. When William Carey went to India, he said, I'm just here to teach you how to get to heaven. I don't care if you burn your widows on the pyre. I don't care if you sacrifice your children. Do we do missions like that today? Do we send people overseas and say, look, it doesn't matter if these people keep sending their children to the mosque or the Buddhist temple. Just teach them how to get to heaven. And it doesn't matter if they do. I don't think we still do that with missions. Maybe we do. Or I don't think we do that. But we've lost our evangelical minds in America because we say, well, we'll teach you how to get to heaven, and then the state can disciple you in every area of life. And we're surprised at the situation we're in. The nation is being discipled. This is my second point. The nation is being discipled. There's no question about it. Jesus said, disciple the nation. Teach them all things that I have commanded. The nation's being discipled. Unfortunately, right now, the one who's discipling the nation is not the Church of Jesus Christ. It's the state. Now, I want to do a show of hands here. I'm not going to ask if anybody sends their kids to the government schools. But I do want to ask this. Raise your hand in here if you went to the government school for any amount of time in your life. I know I did.
Oh, yeah, almost.
That's more than I thought. Put your hands down. That's more than I thought even with this group. Raise your hand again if one of your parents went to the government schools. I'll look around for a minute. It's a lot of hands up. You put them down. Thank you. The numbers say that about 9 out of 10 are in the government school. School-age kids are in the government school right now. 9 out of 10. 90% of this nation. And if you extend that out and you ask 100 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 90 out of 100 would have been in the government school system. And even among us, which is certainly a bit of a weighted sampling, if you will, of the American population, it seems like at least the majority were educated by the state. 90% of this nation is being, has been, or will be, unfortunately, if the trends continue, discipled by the humanist state. The nation is being discipled. Do we understand what that means? The church neglected that for the past 100 years. There's a story that just happened in California. You may have heard of it. There's a small school in California, 3-seat school board. The superintendent says, we're going to throw the homosexuality pride flag up on the school. 2 of the 3 board members say, no, get this out of here, American flag and California flag. California state flag is not much different than the homosex flag, but be that as it may, they said, we don't want this flag, we want these 2. Okay, decent, I guess, but what one of the parents said is revealing. This was a parent, a mother, I believe, who didn't want the homosex flag, agreed. But she said, you know what? The school has crossed the line. They've gone too far here. They've started to teach sex, politics, values. They've crossed the line. And friends, she is wrong. She is way out of line. The state has not crossed the line by teaching those things. The state has crossed the line by teaching anything to your children. Right. Education is inescapably religious. You cannot have an education that doesn't teach on sex, morality, politics, law. I teach my 2-year-old sexual ethics. Age appropriately, a man marries a woman marries a man. You can't avoid that. The state hasn't crossed the line by teaching ethics. The state has crossed the line by taking the discipleship that belongs to the Church of Jesus Christ and hoarding it to themselves. Now, humanism, here's why the gospel is at war with the yellow bus, if I had to summarize it briefly. What is the gospel? It's this message. Jesus is Lord. That's the gospel message. In a nutshell, Jesus is Lord. What's the message of the government school system? It's not that. It's man is Lord. It's humanism. It's not new, friends. What's new is the system of comprehensive, state-funded, state-directed, really funded via theft, education at the scale we have never seen heretofore in history. Never before have we seen education at this scale run by the government. We should be surprised things are not worse. And if the church doesn't wake up and take back the discipleship of the nation, we can only expect worse. Now, humanism, the message that man is Lord, it always terminates in statism. It always terminates in statism because you have to put man at the pinnacle then. And it's always going to be someone, whether it's a Caesar, a czar, an emperor, or the federal government. Some man or group of men is going to be at the top because the message of humanism terminates in statism. Now we need to get something out of our heads as Americans. And that is that this humanistic message can be at peace with the gospel message. Okay, humanism teaches man is Lord. You know how we say that in America? That doesn't sound nice for Americans. So what we say in America is this: we the people are sovereign. We the people are supreme in America. You ever notice how both the left and the right use that? The people on the right are like, these liberals, they're forgetting that in America here, we the people are sovereign. We're going to show it to these liberals. And then the liberals say, you right-wing fundamentalists, you forget that here in America, it's a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And you fascists aren't going to have your way. We have to get out of our thick American skulls that we, the people, as sovereign, is going to accomplish anything. That's the message of the government school system. They don't have a problem teaching that. They'll teach it to the left and the right. Hey, you guys are sovereign. Whatever you decide goes. That's not the gospel message. The gospel message is this: Jesus is Lord. We, the people, are not Lord. That's what the school system teaches. If that's what they teach, do not be surprised when man-made law tyrannizes and terrorizes us, because it will always do so. Luke was not able to speak today. I really wanted him to. But you need to get a copy of his book, because it deals with this issue. We have been brainwashed with this idea of humanism in America, and the church has given her children over to the state to be discipled. Teach us about life. Teach us about sexual ethics. Teach us about politics. Teach us about the law. The church says, we're not going to do that. We can't teach your kids biblical law. We can't teach your kids what the Bible says about taxation. We're not going to do that. The state says, we'll do it. And the church says, okay, here we go. Teach our kids. To wrap up here with some application. If this is ever going to be solved in America, it needs to start with the fathers. It's in Malachi, right at the end of the Old Testament. The hearts of the fathers need to be turned back to their sons and their daughters. Education must be returned to the home. The fathers must care for... This is the job of the church. Should be teaching the fathers this. Teaching the church. This is a responsibility of the Church of Jesus Christ. It's not the responsibility of the state. The yellow bus must become the enemy of the Church of Jesus Christ. It's already the enemy of Christ. Is it our enemy? I know there are people, maybe even in this room, that their kids go to the government school. Well, okay, let's come alongside and tell them, this is an enemy. You're giving your children to an enemy.
That's right.
But we have such a pansy, feminized version of Christianity in America that the pastors won't point out Goliath, who is staring down the people of God. The state has taken the children from the church, from the nation, and is discipling them. We should not be surprised when our land is filled with innocent blood and wicked man-made laws. So don't underestimate the value of discipleship. The church has underestimated it. We can't make a difference if we just teach our children the law of God and the Bible. Well, the state didn't underestimate it. And every time you see that yellow bus, I want you to think something. Other than wishing that it would be destroyed, not when any kids are in it, when the driver's out of it. Wish the whole system would crumble and collapse. We need to be talking about abolishing education. Seriously, not this as a talking point. What would that look like? We don't have time for that now. But when you see the yellow bus, that's discipleship happening. Systematic, intentional, comprehensive discipleship. That's what it looks like. That's not the model we should have. But that's what discipleship looks like. Education. What is education? Teaching people what it means to love God and love neighbor. Fathers and mothers especially, who spend so many hours with their kids, that's your job. The state can't do it. I don't care what facts and information the state can teach your kid. They can't teach him or her to love God and love neighbor. And your job as a parent is to teach your child character, godly character, and the law of God. So they don't grow up and murder their baby or serve the state and arrest someone for selling rifles and shotguns or organic meat. The injustice that is around us was prepared in the government school. And if we are going to see righteousness and peace in our society, we need to begin by going to war with the yellow bus.
Amen.
No border. We need to go to war. It is an enemy of Jesus Christ. And the pastors of this land should be proclaiming that. Thank you for your attention.